So once you tell them a little bit about what micromanagement is, since this is an underlying fear.
Right. So we get probably a call a year from, it's actually a lot of times it's the fire department, but it's been other places. And they say, you know, we're in Texas, so they say, we got ourselves a micromanagement problem and some of our leaders micromanage, and can you do a class on that? And well, yeah, oh yeah, definitely, we can do that. And usually we know the person who's calling. And they're like, all right, well, when can you come out? And so we'll say, all right, well, you know, you want to do next month or whatever, we'll find a date that works. And they'll say, how long do you need? And then I'll say, about 2 minutes. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? And I'll just lay out freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, what we just talked about, and say, if they're freshmen or sophomores, it's not micromanagement, it's management. Keep doing it. Keep telling them how to do the job, what to do. This is what you do. No, do it like this. But if they're juniors or seniors, you have to stop that and back off, because there's nothing people hate more than being told how to do a job that they know how to do. That is micromanagement. And that's the distinction of the manager figuring out, do they actually know, or are they still in the early phases where the best thing I can do to help them climb the learning curve is to give them feedback on the appropriateness of their actions. That's straight out of the playbook for building expertise from Anders Ericsson.
How do you know when they're ready?
It depends on the specific job. And so go back to the pizza example, because why not? You know that they're ready to make the pizza on their own when they can actually make pizza on their own. And so I know it's more complicated we work with a lot
of stuff that
you can't risk. So you can't risk, you mess up a pizza, it tastes terrible, it costs 30 minutes and $20. We work with a lot of physicians. Some of them are surgeons. And depending on the type of surgery, it can take up to 7 years. And so that's a very long time. So because you can't just say, all right, you know, good luck, take out this tumor. Because of the nature of the risk tolerance, sometimes you have to assume a little bit longer runway is needed before you turn them over to it.
I think that the one of the differences in that is that the expectation is clear, right? So when you're going to get a medical degree, depending on which track you decide to go on for your specialization, like there's a formal program that's involved, and it says you're going to have this many years of being a resident and having oversight. And so I think that expectation makes it more acceptable for somebody to be overlooking their shoulder.
Yeah.
Whereas most people are going into jobs and it's just not that clear how long that training period is. And then because the expectation isn't clear, and then we get into people who feel like, well, you get people who are afraid of being caught up as being an imposter.
And companies run lean, so the manager is busy anyway.
Right. And so all of a sudden, you know, like that's two different things. So I think you get caught up in being an imposter. You don't want the visibility. And if you don't have an expectation that it's a longer period of time that you'd be getting trained, then you start to feel like it's micromanagement. And it'd be, you know, helpful to just actually have a conversation about what you think, and probably go on the longer side, like that window of period where you're going to be more in their shorts. And I think you set the expectation for longer, just so that way, you know, if they are a little slower, you're not making them feel like they're wrong. And people who get out of the window sooner can feel like, wow, I really nailed that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think you set a longer expectation for what that is going to look like, where you're going to have a lot more oversight as a manager. And then I think what you're talking about is the opposite, which is, you know, that like organizations at this point are operating so leanly that you have managers who might have good intentions, but like they don't have the capacity
Yep.
to give you the oversight, and you really are sinking or swimming. And
which is a terrible way to do it.
yeah,
That's the old way that's from the 1950s before we started studying development of expertise and management.
but it's the reality in a lot of
It
organizations,
is.
especially lean ones and especially
Yeah.
small ones, because small ones, you're expected to do a million different jobs and not have just like one specialization.
Yeah.
And you know, that means that you leave somebody to figure things out on their own, and then you come back around and they've been doing it on their own, and maybe they've been doing it wrong, but they've been doing it. And now you're coming back after all this time that you haven't been paying attention, and you're going to tell them that they're jacked up. Well, like nobody's going to like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They're very different mechanisms, as you point out. And I think it's a good insight that in the rare places where there's actually an apprenticeship period to be a surgeon, to be a plumber, to be an electrician, I'm trying to think of some others, to go from being a first lieutenant to a second lieutenant to a captain in the Army or something like that, where there are clear gates of here's how you progress through to the next level. And there's often a time period attached to that. People are a lot more open to getting feedback
And
giving feedback to people under them, their direct reports in that. But the vast majority of businesses we operate in have absolutely nothing like that. That you just, here, you're doing the job. This is your supervisor. We're going to have one-on-ones. We're going to have one-on-ones every 2 weeks, and then we're going to cancel 50% of them.
Right. I was just going to say that's actually a pretty high rate where, you know, the research does say like weekly
would be better.
Yeah,
for engagement. And you know, we go back to this, you and I are now getting old enough to where we've lived through 2 cycles of generational repetitiveness. So people always want to talk about the generations, and people say the same stuff about the millennials that they're now saying about Gen Z. And a lot of it, one of the things that comes up a lot is, well, they need so much praise, and they need, you know, they're always asking for, you know, how am I doing, et cetera.
Everybody needs praise when they start.
Right. Right. It's not a function of they're weak and need praise and a trophy. It's a function of they're freshmen and sophomores, and they actually need the direction.
Well, yeah, praise is a form of feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's again, to use the scientific jargon of developing expertise from Anders Ericsson, the seminal article on the violin studies from, I forget what year, but it's, in order to get good at something, you have to actually, number one, do the thing. And then number two, get rapid feedback on the appropriateness of your actions.
And so that kind of leads
Which usually comes from a coach or a boss.
Right. And so that leads us into, why is this so hard? Like, why are managers not doing this? And we've talked about the micromanagement, but now let's talk about basically people who don't want to be perceived as like argumentative or
which is almost everybody.
Or conflict.
Yeah. So, you know, people think arguing is a bad word. There's an assessment that we use a lot. It's borrowed from the social science on having it's what we would call constructive conversations, but it's called argumentativeness, but people think it's a bad word. But we have to argue. We have to be able to say, no, that's not right. I see it this way. And sort our way through that. And feedback can feel like an argument, especially if your direct report's been doing it for a little bit. It's easy to feel defensive as a direct report. Why am I still getting this feedback? You have all of the competence issues come up, like I should know how to do this. And so there's an urge or an instinct to want that feedback to stop even before you may know fully what you're doing. And then humans, we have many faults, but we are exquisitely evolved to sense interpersonal strife. because that's what kept us in the tribe or banished us from the tribe. And so the people who weren't good at sensing that were much less likely to pass their genes along.
Yeah, they were the food testers.
Right. Let them
look at this crazy thing. Let's see if it's actually edible.
That's
Here you
right.
go, Bob.
Yeah. Let's let them here. You can chase the saber-toothed tiger. Oh, my bad. That didn't work out too well. Yeah, they're the currently, we call, I don't know. I was going to talk about the social isolates, right? How not having any close relationships actually increases your morbidity, your chance of dying more than drinking, smoking, and doing drugs, doing all three. And almost everything that we're talking about all flows to the same inclination that the point of this podcast is to try to overcome. You're, as a manager, going to be far more likely to stop giving feedback and direction before you should than the opposite. The irony of this topic is that almost no one is a micromanager. We feel every one of them because they're so weird. And what almost everybody is a non-manager before they should, meaning they're pulling back the management and leaving their person struggling in a black hole when they still could benefit from the direction and the coaching to be able to more quickly move up the learning curve. That's the irony, is that the people who call us for a micromanagement class don't actually have a micromanagement problem. They have a management problem.
Right. I can think of times in my life where I've had somebody who should have been more instructive, like for whatever reason, like whatever group I was part of, and they weren't, and it was sink or swim. And so I figured out how to swim. And then when they came back to try to tell me how to do the stroke, I was like, screw you. Like, where have you been?
Right.
And so and that's where it starts. That's where micromanagement, I think, gets mislabeled.
Yeah, sure.
Like,
I could have used you.
I could have used you. How dare you come back after I've suffered?
Yeah. Yes. And everything underlying this entire podcast, management, before there was a science of it where people had spent their careers trying to figure out how to better supervise people, there was on-the-job training, which is what we're talking about. Here, good luck. And what happens if your management style, as you call it, laissez-faire, which is just similar for laying back and not doing anything, or OJT, on-the-job training, where you just go, good luck, figure it out. Well, what happens is you have to have, it takes a lot longer and there's a lot more washout and turnover, which is a long way of saying people do not develop anywhere near as fast as they might otherwise. And you lose people who you might otherwise have kept. And so it's very costly to not help people in those crucial early phases.
Sure, because I just want to say this because I'm not sure it came through, but you increase the turnover because in being aloof, you're sending the message you don't care.
Yeah, sure.
And so then they stop caring about you or the organization.